Riftbound has finally released worldwide with its first set, Origins. This debut set is complete with typical kinds of cards you would see in any card game's initial set list, as well as plenty of cards that are tailored towards specific Riftbound mechanics. Today we're going to be taking a look at 4 of the best cards from each domain, as well as the 4 most notable battlefields from the Origins set, so that you're familiar with the most important cards you should be aware of. I'm Rose of 4 Hearts, and today we're going to review Riftbound Origins. Arguably the most notable card in the whole set, Falling Star is hands down one of the strongest, if not the strongest, cards in the Fury domain. For 2 energy and 2 power, this card deals 2 instances of 3 damage to 1 unit or 2 different units depending on the user's target selection. This card is incredibly strong in opening hands in particular, as it completely shuts down 2 and 3 drop units. This helps to establish or accelerate early game tempo by potentially removing 2 opposing units from the board. It can also provide some decent value in the mid and late game by dealing 6 damage to 1 unit instead of splitting the damage. The only drawbacks to this card are its rather hefty power cost for a card that prefers to be played early, and its default speed that limits its usage. This card has really strong synergy with Daughter of the Void and decent synergy with Darkchild. One of the most consistently valuable champion units in the game right now is Kaisa Survivor. As a 4 energy cost, 4 might unit with Accelerate and an ability that draws a card upon conquering, Kaisa Survivor is an incredibly cost-efficient, versatile unit that slots into a plethora of decks and sequences really well. The only con is that its might is somewhat average for a mid-range unit, but its ability has so much upside that paired with other strong cards in the red domain, this is rarely an issue. This card has amazing synergy with Daughter of the Void and good synergy with Darkchild. The safest Fury spell you can run that should see value in just about every matchup is Void Seeker. This 3 energy cost, 1 power cost spell deals 4 damage to a unit at a battlefield and allows the user to draw 1 card. Placing more damage on a unit than the amount of energy being played to cast a spell on top of drawing a card is very efficient. Similar to Falling Star, this spell is great for accelerating your tempo and placing opponents even further behind by potentially removing a unit and simultaneously giving yourself more options in hand. The only downside is that it does have 1 power cost, but the trade-off is well worth it when used even semi-optimally. This card has fantastic synergy with Daughter of the Void and Darkchild and can be played with any other Fury deck. As one of the more unique units in the Fury domain, Bi-Destructive finds most of its value when paired with one of the strongest Chaos cards, Ride the Wind. This 2 energy cost, 1 power cost champion unit with ganking is incredibly intimidating due to its ability to achieve an absurd amount of might thanks to its ability. At default speed, Bi-Destructive's controller can recycle 1 card from the trash in exchange for an increase of 1 might. This ability can be used as many times as they wish during their turn. The combination of ganking, a seemingly unlimited might total, and relatively cheap cost makes Vi one of the best units for closing out games. The 2 drawbacks here are that the increased might is lost in the following turn, and it does have a power cost. This champion unit plays really well with Darkchild and can find value in loose cannon as well. Most direct counterplay that's currently in the game is reserved for the Calm domain, which has made Defy one of the most valuable spells in the first set. For 1 energy and 1 power, this reaction speed card counters any spell that costs no more than 4 energy and 1 power. Negating opposing spells is a super valuable effect, and being able to do it for basically as cheap as possible at reaction speed can create highly favorable energy trades. This does come with a power cost, but one that is well worth it in most circumstances. This is a concrete staple for green decks that can be pivotal in many matchups. A very common card that still feels somewhat underappreciated is Discipline. For 2 energy, this spell gives the unit +2 might for the turn and allows the user to draw a card. This is an incredibly cost-effective mixture of offense and defense through a might increase as well as draw support. Being able to do both of these at reaction speed becomes an incredibly deceptive tool that can be used to bait opponents into bad situations, punishing them heavily if they attempt sequences requiring any tight math. There's really no downside to this card and it slots really well with any Calm deck. Another simple but effective card for the Calm domain is Charm. For 1 energy and 1 power, this spell allows the user to move any enemy unit to any other valid location. This is currently the Calm domain's only means of directly disrupting opposing board states, and can also be used to force interaction in attempts to gain more tempo or leverage over opponents. Losing 1 rune to play the card can be unfortunate in some situations, but the potential upside when played on the right target will often make for a worthy trade. This card is particularly strong synergy with Nine-Tailed Fox and Wuju Bladesman, but can be used sparingly in any green deck. Slotted into a domain that leans rather heavily into combat tricks, Zhonya's Hourglass serves as a strong last resort for when showdowns don't go your way. For 2 energy, this gear can be played to save the next unit that would otherwise die. When played ordinarily, this card does have default speed, but it can be hit into battlefields for 1 power, and as of now, it can't be outright negated by anything in the game. The only drawback is that if it's played to base, it will automatically activate upon the first valid condition that occurs. This card finds its highest value with Wuju Bladesman, but can achieve decent results in Blind Monk as well. Closing cards are really important for rounding out decks, but most of them require at least 1 other combo piece to execute game-winning turns. This is where Thousand-Tailed Watcher has carved out an incredibly valuable space as a mid to late game unit that only relies on the user having a handful of units in base and opponents actively controlling battlefields. For 7 energy and 1 power, this 7 might unit with Accelerate has the ability to give all enemy units -3 might the turn it's played, to a minimum of 1 might. Decreasing 3 might on every unit makes every angle of your offense more potent. Combined with an Accelerate tag, this ability heavily punishes decks that play more defensively in the late game, as well as opponents who aren't accounting for Thousand-Tailed Watcher when setting up their mid or late game board states. The only downside is that there is a 1 power cost that does increase to 2 for the Accelerate, but 8 energy and 2 power is well worth it for a card that can single-handedly win games with the right setup. This unit has strong synergy with Nine-Tailed Fox and Daughter of the Void. With an ability that allows the unit to scale, reset, and scale again during every turn, Ravenbloom Student is one of the most annoying 2-drops to play against. For 2 energy, this 2 might unit gains 1 might for the turn every time its user plays a spell. This passive might increase essentially adds an additional +1 might ability to every spell you play for a very cheap cost in the long term. This ability works in both the user's turn and opponent turns, which makes it incredibly difficult to target. If you attempt to kill it with spells instead of showdowns, it will almost never feel like the right choice despite the unit having immense offensive potential. Opponents have to be confident they can kill Ravenbloom Student, or risk wasting spells that they could have otherwise saved for bigger units that are hypothetically more threatening. This card has great synergy with Daughter of the Void and Nine-Tailed Fox, and can find some value in Herald of the Arcane. One of the most devastating cards to run into in early game scenarios is Smokescreen. For 2 energy and 1 power, this reaction speed spell gives the unit -4 might to a minimum of 1 might during the turn it's played. While this isn't outright unit removal on its own, this spell is one of the blue domain's most consistent ways to eliminate problematic units, opening the door to kill mid-range units through showdowns with smaller units, or kill large units through a combination of spells and combat. This spell has really good synergy with Daughter of the Void and Nine-Tailed Fox. Another might decreasing spell, Stupefy is arguably the mind domain's most impactful staple. For 1 energy, this card decreases the might of a unit by 1 might during the turn it's played, and allows the user to draw 1 card. At reaction speed, this card is incredibly efficient and versatile as it's able to be used offensively, defensively, or simply as draw support. Stupefy doesn't have any specific legend synergies, but is a really good staple worth consideration in any blue deck. With other domains not having the strongest ramping options, Catalyst of Aeons really pushes the late game identity of the body domain. For 4 energy, this spell allows the user to channel 2 runes exhausted and or draw 1 card if they weren't able to channel both runes. This combination of rune and potential draw support is really good for establishing tempo over opponents in terms of access to mid and late game sequences. The only downside is that it's relatively expensive, so in most games you won't be able to play it until your second turn. It works really well with Relentless Storm and Ruju Bladesman's Dazzling Aurora build, but can be slotted as a staple in any orange deck. Instant offense is one of the best qualities a unit can have in Riftbound, which makes Deadbloom Predator valuable for any body deck. For 8 energy and 2 power, this 8 might unit with Deflect can be played to any battlefield that's currently occupied by an enemy unit. The inclusion of this unit forces opponents to always be wary of hands when facing body decks. Being able to apply pressure before it's even hit the board while also having Deflect available when it does, makes Deadbloom Predator a monster of an offensive unit. It has strong synergy with Wuju Bladesman and Relentless Storm in particular. Arguably the body domain's most versatile unit, Kiana Victorious can fill a few different roles on offense. This 4 energy, 1 power cost unit with 4 might has Deflect and an ability that allows its user to draw 1 card or channel 1 rune exhausted when it conquers. This makes Kiana a pain to stop with spells as her Deflect cost can create rune advantages, but she has to be dealt with, otherwise she'll create hand size or rune advantages anyway. The power cost is somewhat unfortunate, but a balanced trade for all the value Kiana can potentially provide. This unit doesn't have any specific synergies with legends, but is worth considering for any orange deck. For a domain that focuses on mid-range offense, Unyielding Spirit is an incredibly useful staple. For 1 energy and 1 power, this reaction speed spell prevents all spell and ability damage during the turn it's played. For body domain's purposes, this essentially acts as an all-encompassing defy when it comes to damage outside of combat. Due to the general application, it doesn't have any specific synergies and should at the very least be included in sideboards for the body domain. You may not want to include it in your main deck however, as its value is rather matchup dependent. In a domain that's focused on executing unconventional strategies, Traveling Merchant acts as the ignition for a variety of shenanigans. For 2 energy, this 2 might unit allows its controller to discard 1 card and draw 1 card every time it moves. This is incredibly efficient draw support and discard acceleration for decks that can consistently protect it and provide it with locations to move between. It finds its best synergy with Loose Cannon and Darkchild, but can be useful in any Chaos deck that's not afraid of discarding a few cards. As one of the best game-ending cards that can flip defense on its head, Ride the Wind is a very useful card with a high ceiling for skill expression. For 2 energy and 1 power, this action speed spell allows the user to move a friendly unit and ready it. This essentially gives the unit 2 additional moves if played during its controller's turn, which can be incredibly strong in the right decks. While it does have a power cost, the potential point advantage that can be claimed with this card is a tremendous upside. It has really strong synergy with Bounty Hunter and Unforgiven in particular, but really warrants inclusion in any purple deck. For Chaos builds that like to limit interaction as much as possible, Fight or Flight finds solid value on both offense and defense. For 2 energy, this action speed spell with Hidden allows its user to move a unit from a battlefield to its base. Since there's no restriction on its targeting, this card can be used to protect units or temporarily remove opposing problematic units to create advantages. When combined with other movement-based cards, this can become a real headache for opponents playing more straightforward decks. It functions incredibly well with Darkchild most often, but can find use in any purple deck. Due to the occasionally reckless nature of the Chaos Domain, having a spell like Stack Deck that's a little more open can provide some solid consistency. For 1 energy, this action speed spell allows its user to look at the top 3 cards of their main deck, put 1 into their hand, and recycle the rest. While this isn't the craziest effect, doing this for just 1 energy honestly feels like cheating. It's incredibly cost effective as the cheapest draw support possible and should be included in any Chaos deck. Moving into our final domain, Grand Stratagem is a card that feels a little gimmicky, but finds so much value under the right conditions. For 6 energy and 3 power, this action speed spell gives all friendly units an additional 5 might during the turns played. This can create an absurd might advantage that can only be matched by countering the spell outright or somehow removing a significant amount of the boosted units. While 3 power is a hefty cost and 6 energy isn't exactly cheap either, when paired with the plethora of cheap units and tokens, this card can be game changing or ending. It has amazing synergy with Herald of the Arcane and can extend the aggression of some hand obnoxious builds as well. One of the more interesting cards in this first set is Hidden Blade. For 2 energy and 1 power, this action speed spell with Hidden kills the unit at a battlefield and allows the controller of that unit to draw 2 cards. This card is really versatile as it can be used to outright remove an opposing problematic unit, or as draw support if the user has a unit that's about to die anyway or is generally no longer useful. The only drawbacks are that it does have a power cost and it does serve as draw support for your opponent when removing their units. Even so, it's a good option for killing units that can be useful in any order deck. Valuable for similar reasons as Hidden Blade, Cold the Weak is the most consistent removal option that order decks have access to. For 2 energy and 1 power, this default speed spell forces each player to kill one of their units. While it can only be played during the controller's turn, sacrificing a weaker unit or token for a stronger opposing unit is an excellent way to swing tempo back into your favor. The power cost is a bit unfortunate, but this card is still a good staple for any yellow deck. The final main deck card we'll be looking at is Sorin Scout. This 2 energy, 1 might unit has a Death Knell ability that allows the user to channel 1 Rune Exhausted. This is a rather cost-effective unit that forces opponents to choose between letting it rack up points early, let it provide an additional rune, or settle for both happening if they play too slowly into it. With most order decks exuding most of their pressure in the mid and late game, Sorin Scout is really useful for providing a slight tempo advantage that can become much more with proper trading and sequencing. It's best suited for Herald of the Arcane, but is all around a good 2-drop for order decks. Closing things out with the battlefields, one of the most popular we've seen among decks that enjoy combat is Grove of the Godwillow. This battlefield allows its current occupant to draw 1 card when they hold it, which provides some additional consistency for decks that can reasonably achieve consistent holds, especially if they're also decks that don't have the strongest draw engines on their own. This battlefield works really well with Wuju Bladesman, Nine-Tailed Fox, and Radiant Dawn most commonly, but can be played well with any defensive decks that spike before the late game. The Dreaming Tree is another form of external draw support that especially helps decks that like to play defensive spells. When a player first chooses a unit at this battlefield for the first time each turn, they draw a card. This battlefield most commonly finds use in combination with the combat tricks of Calm decks, but can be played with any deck that plays a good amount of spells that target friendly units. Another form of draw support that focuses specifically on showdown resolution is on Warrens. When this battlefield is conquered, the player that conquered it discards 1 card and then draws 1 card. This is Traveling Merchant's ability on a battlefield, which gives every deck access to the effect. This is really strong for any decks that like to cycle through cards and or like to be aggressive early and don't mind throwing a couple cards away to find more optimal options, most notably Loose Cannon and Darkchild. The final card we'll look at for this set is Obelisk of Power. At the start of each player's first beginning phase, that player channels 1 rune. This creates games where the player going first will start with either 3 or 4 runes, and the player going second will start with either 4 or 5 runes, depending on how many Obelisk of Power are in the current game. This is really helpful for decks that are looking to scale into the late game as quickly as possible, like Wuju Bladesman and Relentless Storm. That wraps up our Origins set review. If you found this video helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. Good luck in your games, and thanks for watching.